The moment Germany truly understood what America was capable of didn't happen in a single explosion or on a single battlefield. It wasn't one of those dramatic scenes from a war movie where everything changes in a flash. Instead, it unfolded gradually through a combination of shock, miscalculation, and a deep misunderstanding of a nation that had been underestimated from the beginning. In the early years of World War II, Nazi Germany didn't view the United States as a serious military threat. To them, America was a distant industrial giant, impressive on paper but slow, divided, and too far away to shape the outcome in Europe. Hitler often mocked the idea that America could mobilize quickly. He believed its diversity made it weak, that its democracy made it indecisive, and that its military was inexperienced and clumsy. In private conversations, he was even more dismissive. America is a country of businessmen, he said. They cannot wage a real war. What he didn't understand, what Germany didn't understand, was that America's strength didn't come from tradition like Britain's, or from ideology like Germany's. It came from a unique combination of industrial power, social energy, raw ingenuity, and a national temperament that, once awakened, became almost impossible to contain. But Germany's miscalculation didn't fully reveal itself until 1942, when events across the Atlantic began shifting faster than Berlin could comprehend. Even before Pearl Harbor, American factories were producing weapons at a pace the world had never seen. Entire industries were reinvented in months. Car companies converted assembly lines from sedans to tanks. Shipyards started building Liberty ships faster than anyone believed possible, at one point producing an entire cargo vessel in just a few days. The noise of welding torches, the thunder of machinery, the endless movement of steel across conveyor belts. These became the heartbeat of a new America, an America that no longer watched the world burn from a distance. Meanwhile, in Berlin, Nazi leadership saw only the surface. They convinced themselves that America's entry into the war was symbolic, a political gesture with little practical consequence. German intelligence consistently underestimated U.S. industrial capacity. Reports arriving on Hitler's desk were often filtered to match what he wanted to hear. He believed the war would be over long before American troops arrived in meaningful numbers. And besides, Germany was fighting on its own terms, racing across continents, expanding relentlessly. But there were cracks. The first real shock for Germany came in the Atlantic, where U.S. shipyards began replacing sunk merchant vessels faster than German U-boats could eliminate them. Submarine commanders, who once boasted that Britain would starve before America could respond, suddenly watched as their victories became meaningless. For every ship the U-boats sent to the bottom of the ocean, two more seemed to appear in its place. It was the first hint, a faint echo across the waves, that America was not built like other nations. Then came North Africa. American troops were inexperienced at first, clumsy. Even the early battles revealed tactical weaknesses that Germany mocked. The Africa Corps considered American units slow and unsure. But what Germany didn't expect was how fast the Americans learned. Every mistake became a lesson. Every loss turned into fuel. Soldiers who had never seen combat before 1942 were fighting like veterans. By mid-1943, their equipment, mass-produced and constantly refined, began matching and eventually surpassing what Germany could field. But the moment that truly shook Germany, the moment when the illusion shattered, came during the combined bombing campaigns over Europe. Germany had always relied on its air defenses, believing that its fortresses and factories were untouchable. British bombers had caused damage, yes, but the Luftwaffe had grown used to their patterns, their limitations. Then American bombers arrived. Unlike the British, the Americans flew in daylight. They came in tight formations, waves of them, thousands of tons of explosives dropping in precise patterns. Factories that Germany believed could never be destroyed vanished in clouds of fire and twisted metal rail yards. Crumbled synthetic fuel plants, vital to the German war machine, were hammered relentlessly. Entire cities were mapped from the sky and struck with frightening accuracy. German officers who watched the skies said it felt like the horizon had turned metallic. The roar of engines became a constant presence, like thunder that refused to fade. Hitler, upon hearing the scale of the bombing raids, fell into furious denial. He blamed incompetence, traitors, technology failures, anyone but himself, or his misjudgment of America. But deep inside the Wehrmacht, the truth had settled in. America wasn't just participating in the war. America was overwhelming. It's still. The final revelation, the day Germany truly grasped what America was, didn't happen until June 6, 1944 day. German commanders in France woke up that morning to the sound of naval guns so powerful they shook windows miles inland off the coast of Normandy. The largest amphibious invasion in human history, unfolded with mathematical precision. The scale was something the German imagination had never anticipated. It wasn't just the number of ships, it was the organization, the speed, the coordination. America had delivered a full-scale army across an ocean with supplies, equipment, vehicles, engineers, medics, and air support woven together like a single, unstoppable machine. German officers who observed the beach landing sent frantic messages to Berlin. This is not possible. No other nation could have planned this for the first time. Germany realized that America fought war the same way it built cities and industries, systematically, relentlessly, and with a level of production that defied every expectation. A German general later said, "We did not lose to the American soldier, we lost to the American factory." But even that wasn't the full truth. America's strength wasn't in one bomber, or one tank, or one soldier, or one landing craft. It was in the combination, the unity of a nation that had been underestimated, mocked, and dismissed, only to reveal a capability so vast and so adaptable that even the most fanatical German officers were forced to admit, we never understood what they were capable of. And on the day Normandy fell, on the day Allied flags rose across captured beaches, Germany finally learned what America really was. A nation that could reinvent itself overnight, outproduce an empire, cross an ocean, and fight a global war on multiple fronts, all at once. But there was still more to come because America had not yet shown its full strength. The real shock, the true turning point that broke Germany's confidence completely, would arrive later when American forces pushed deeper into Europe and exposed the greatest miscalculation in Hitler's entire strategy: the belief that America lacked the will, the unity, and the industrial firepower to win a long war. He would learn far too late that America's power didn't come from tradition or experience. It came from something deeper. As 1944 turned into 1945, the speed with which America advanced stunned even the most seasoned German commanders. After the breakout from Normandy, Allied divisions, many of them American-led, moved through France faster than German intelligence believed physically possible. Roads clogged with military convoys stretched for miles. An endless river of trucks, tanks, fuel carriers, artillery, and men. German officers studied reconnaissance photos and whispered among themselves that no military in history had ever moved with such momentum. The German army, once feared across the world, now found itself outmaneuvered and outpaced at every turn. American logistics, a concept Germany had always underestimated, became the silent weapon that broke the Wehrmacht's backbone. Supplies flowed like water behind American lines. If roads were destroyed, engineers rebuilt them within hours. If bridges were blown up, temporary replacements rose almost overnight. Entire divisions could relocate with breathtaking speed, supported by a logistical network so efficient that German officers called it the conveyor belt of war. In Berlin, the disbelief grew. Hitler exploded in rage during briefings, insisting the American advance was exaggerated, that reports were false, that generals were lying. He refused to believe a nation he had once dismissed as soft and undisciplined could outperform his armies. But outside the bunkers, the truth was undeniable. Truman's soldiers, captured in France and Belgium, described American equipment as almost endless: fresh tanks, fresh uniforms, fresh ammunition. They spoke of American artillery barrages so intense that the ground seemed to melt. They described skies filled with American aircraft day and night, each one protected by formations so large that German fighters rarely survived more than a few minutes. One German officer famously said, "You don't defeat the Americans. You survive them." And even that became harder as the months passed. When the German army attempted its final desperate counterattack in the ardent what became known as the Battle of the Bulge, the American response shocked Germany once again. Hitler had believed winter weather and surprise would give him the advantage. At first it seemed to work. American units were pushed back, supply lines restrained, and chaos spread along the front. But instead of collapsing, the Americans regrouped. Reinforcements arrived faster than German planners believed. Possible entire divisions shifted in a matter of days. The skies eventually cleared, and when they did, American bombers returned with devastating force. German troops who had once seen the Battle of the Bulge as their last great chance now watched the American counterattack unfold with horrifying clarity. It wasn't just that the Americans had numbers. It was the speed, the coordination, the sheer confidence with which they fought. In frozen forests and shattered towns, young American soldiers held their ground with a determination that defied every stereotype Germany had believed. By January, the German offensive collapsed completely, and the Wehrmacht lost irreplaceable men and resources. From that moment on, the outcome of the war became inevitable. But the true shock, the moment when Germany finally understood the scale of the mistake, came as Allied troops crossed into Germany itself. Cities once considered untouchable shrank beneath American air raids. Factories that had powered the German war machine lay in ruins. Rail networks shattered. Fuel, supplies evaporated, and the once pro-Luftwaffe was reduced to a handful of desperate pilots flying outdated aircraft against overwhelming American air superiority. Meanwhile, American troops advancing through the Rhineland encountered a Germany exhausted, starving, and deeply fractured. Yet even in its collapse, the Nazi regime continued to cling to fantasies of miraculous weapons and last-min salvation. Hitler still spoke of turning the tide with new rocket systems, jet fighters, or secret technology, but to the generals around him, the truth was devastatingly clear. There was no miracle coming. The war was lost, in no small part, because they had fundamentally misunderstood the nation, now advancing toward Berlin. One night, in early 1945, a German officer, a veteran of the Eastern Front, reportedly said to a colleague, "We thought America was a giant with soft bones. We were wrong. They are a giant with steel bones." By March, American tanks were crossing the Rhine River, something German strategy had once claimed was impossible without massive casualties. But the Americans didn't cross. Just at one point, they crossed at several, including Remagen, where U.S. forces captured a bridge intact, shocking German command. Hitler erupted in fury, ordering executions, convinced the loss was due to sabotage. But sabotage wasn't necessary. The Americans were simply too fast, too organized, too relentless. To soldiers on the ground, the truth was even clearer. American units came with radios in almost every vehicle, maps updated daily, and supply trucks that never seemed to stop arriving. German troops, by contrast, often fought without proper ammunition, using bicycles or even horses to move what little equipment they had left. The contrast was so brutal that some German officers privately admitted the war had been lost the moment America entered it with full force. But perhaps the most shocking moment, the moment that struck at German pride more deeply than any battle, came when American forces liberated the concentration camps. The soldiers who entered those camps were changed forever by what they saw. But Germany, too, was forced to see something it had tried desperately to hide. The discovery of the camps, the emaciated survivors, the piles of belongings, the crude systems of death revealed the monstrous reality of the Nazi regime. America documented everything. Photographs, testimonies, films, all meticulously gathered, and Germany watched, horrified, as the truth spread across the world. For the Nazi leadership, this was a different kind of defeat. Not military, but moral. A defeat that could never be undone, never rewritten. America had not only the industrial and military power to crush Germany, but also the moral authority to expose its darkest secrets. It was a humiliation deeper than any battlefield loss, and for many Germans, it was the final confirmation that everything they had believed about the war and about themselves had been a lie. As Allied forces closed in on Berlin, from east and west, German generals faced the reality they had feared for months. The United States was not just another enemy. It was a force beyond anything they had imagined. A nation with an unmatched ability to mobilize, adapt, produce, and endure. Mobilize, adapt, produce, and endure. A nation fueled not by ideology or conquest, but by a sense of purpose that grew stronger. With every mile advanced, every town liberated, every bridge repaired, every battle won. Germany had underestimated America's factories. They had underestimated its soldiers. They had underestimated its resolve. And now, for the first time, they understood what America truly was. The final revelation, the day Germany saw America's full power with absolute clarity, would come in the closing weeks of the war, when the U.S. Army swept deeper into the heart of Germany and cracked open the last illusions of the Nazi state. By April 1945, Germany was collapsing from every direction. But it wasn't just the advancing armies that broke the Nazi regime. It was the realization spreading through every bunker, every command post, every whispered conversation among officers that America had proven them wrong on every level. The myths they had believed, the calculations they had trusted, the arrogance they had repeated for years, all dissolved in the harsh light of reality. The final blow came when American forces pushed into central Germany, moving faster than any German planner thought possible. Entire towns surrendered. At the first sight of approaching U.S. armor, civilians waved white sheets from windows. German soldiers abandoned their posts, not out of cowardice, but because they knew resistance was meaningless. The American tide was unstoppable. Not reckless, not chaotic, but measured, disciplined, and overwhelmingly effective. American columns stretched across the countryside like steel rivers, flowing through villages, forests, and open fields with an ease that seemed unreal after years of brutal warfare. Tanks rolled forward with confidence. Infantry patrols fanned out methodically. Engineers repaired infrastructure within hours, and supply lines reached so deep into Germany that some soldiers joked the army could probably feed half the country if it wanted to. One German general, captured near the harsh mountains, reportedly said, "Fighting the Americans is like fighting the future." He didn't mean their weapons. He meant their system, their mentality, their adaptability. America didn't just bring men and machines. It brought an entirely new way of waging war, one Germany had no answer to. When U.S. forces linked up with the Soviets on the Elbe River, the symbolic moment was clear. The war in Europe was effectively over. But for Germany's remaining leadership, the shock went even deeper. They had believed for years that America lacked the will to fight a long, total war. Yet here the Americans were, millions of soldiers, strong, fully supplied, confident, and cooperating in a massive global strategy stretching across continents. Berlin fell soon after. Though the Americans did not take it, that final assault was left to the Soviets. Still, Germany understood fully, irrevocably, that American power had reshaped the war long before the city's capture. Hitler, isolated and delusional in his bunker, continued to talk about miracle weapons and impossible victories. But the officers around him had long abandoned those fantasies. The facts were too obvious to ignore. When Germany finally surrendered on May 8, 1945, many of its officers and intellectuals looked back on the war with a different kind of shock. Not just that they had lost, but that they had so profoundly misunderstood the enemy who defeated them. America had entered the war late, untested, unprepared in many ways, yet within a few short years it had become a military and industrial giant beyond anything the world had seen. The sheer scale of its mobilization changed the direction of history. For Germany, it marked the most humbling realization of all. America wasn't just another nation participating in the conflict. America was the deciding force, the weight on the scale that made victory impossible for the Reich. And that truth became crystal clear only when it was too late to change anything. In the years after the war, as Germany rebuilt itself from ruins, this understanding lingered in the background, a quiet acknowledgement that the United States had fought in a way no other country ever had, not through tradition, not through ideology, but through a mix of innovation, determination, and power rooted in industry and collective resolve. The day Germany learned what America really was did not happen in a single moment, But the realization hit hardest in the final weeks of the war, when the last illusions dissolved and the truth stood plain. The nation they once mocked as unfocused, inexperienced, and soft had turned out to be something entirely different. A force capable of reshaping the world at best. Space. Stop.